Hello my friends, Hank here, and today we are talking all about a wonderful, angry little tractor that probably never should have seen the light of day in Vietnam, but I for one am so glad that it did. This is the Rifle Multiple 106mm Self-Propelled M50, more commonly known as the M50 Ontos. Before I show you guys how I painted this up though, let's learn a little bit about the history of its development. Now, the story of the Ontos begins way back in the 1950s when the US military was super excited about making everything fit into airplanes. Nowadays, that's not as big of a deal, but in the 50s, being able to load an armored vehicle into an aircraft and fly it just about anywhere you'd like was a new thing. In the wake of World War II, where the US had encountered a whole slew of impressive German armor in Europe, and with the looming threat of the Soviet Union and all of its tanks very much at the front of mind, the powers that be here in the States were still playing around with the concept of a fast, nimble tank destroyer that could pack a serious punch against enemy armor. The Army had put out a request for a sub-20-ton tank destroyer that they could comfortably load in their transport aircraft at the time, and a little tractor company called Allis-Chalmers ended up picking up the contract. Now, I call Allis-Chalmers a tractor company because that's what they were in the 20s and 30s. They made farm equipment, tractors, balers, harvesters, all in their iconic orange finish. In the 40s, they also made tractors for the Army, notably the M4 and the M6 high-speed artillery tractors, respectively. But up until that point, Allis-Chalmers had never made anything that went boom, so to speak. Nothing with any major armament. So what on earth are these guys doing making a tank destroyer? Evidently, somebody had some confidence in the company because they did get a contract to build 14 pilot vehicles, and between 1952 and 1955, Allis-Chalmers came up with the monstrosity that would become the M50. Now, the suspension in the hull, not that big of an issue for these guys, right? They make tractors, easy enough. The interesting part comes up top. Right around that same time, the folks at the Watervliet Arsenal in New York had just built a brand new 105mm crew-serviced recoilless rifle designated the M40. Now, these were primarily designed for use on the ground in a small little wheeled mount, but the team at Allis-Chalmers saw these and eventually just went, let's use those on our tractors. Recoilless rifles, as the name suggests, don't have a recoil mechanism, so they're much smaller, more slender weapons than their traditional counterparts, but the force from the round firing still needs to go somewhere, and the reason you don't usually see these on armored vehicles is because all that backward force comes in the form of an enormous backblast of gas vented out the rear of the rifle when it is fired. Do yourself a favor and look up a video of an M40 firing. Ian McCollum has a great walkthrough of the M40. It's absolutely insane. It almost looks like the thing is firing in both directions. The obvious problem here is that if you mount one of these to be serviced inside of a turret, the second that thing fires, everybody in the vehicle is going to have a very, very, very bad day. So what do? Why would you use these on a purpose-designed tank destroyer if you can't access them from inside of the vehicle? This is how I imagine the pitch went to the Army. So, Allis-Chalmers, we're excited to see your new tank destroyer. Tell us all about it. Right, so we hit all your requirements. It's light, it's got a 3-man crew, and we're going to use the new M40 recoilless rifle. What? How are you going to put that in a turret? Won't the backblast be extremely dangerous? Oh no, don't worry about it. We're just going to put it on top of the turret outside. What do you mean? You're just going to stick one on top of the tractor? No, we're going to put 6 of them up there. What? Yeah. And then you aim each one of them individually with the 50 caliber spotting rifle. You know, you just little round, and then the big round. How do you reload? Oh, you just get out. You just get out back and put a new round in. You've never done this before, have you? Oh, by the way, there's a 30 cal on the roof too, just in case. Oh, we call it the Ontos, by the way. It means the thing in Greek. So that's exactly how it went, I'm sure. As you might expect, the Army was not having it. They promptly canceled their order and would wait a few years and instead dump their money into another wacky airborne tank of a more missile-centric variety. So at that point, it seemed as though the M50's military career was over before it even started. Nobody wanted this tin can covered in recoilless rifles, and in particular, nobody wanted to make their crews climb out into the open and reload the damn thing. But then, enter stage right, here comes the US Marine Corps. There's a joke in there somewhere. I will not make it because I have not served in uniform, but you vets in the comments, go nuts. In any case, the Marines were in desperate need for lightweight armored vehicles with anti-tank capabilities and threw some money at Allis-Chalmers, eventually drawing up a contract for a production of 297 M50s. And then the M50s sat around for a while until they eventually got the nod in Vietnam. Turns out, however, the NVA and the Viet Cong didn't have any tanks putting around in the late 1960s, so once again it would seem the M50 tank destroyer had no tanks to destroy. So, the Marines gave our little ugly ducklings some new jobs, namely anti-personnel and bunker busting. The M40 could fire a nasty M581 anti-personnel flechette round, or a beehive round, that essentially just flicked thousands of tiny metal darts downrange at anything unfortunate enough to be there. It also could fire a big old 40-pound squash head round that really didn't seem to mind whether it was blowing up armor, buildings, stone walls, trees, pillboxes, or really anything else. Long story short, the Marines made the M50 work for them. There's a fantastic article on ArmoryLife.com written by this fella named Dale Dye, a Marine vet you guys probably have never heard of and definitely haven't seen on TV, talking about witnessing the M50 in action during the Tet Offensive in the brutal fighting in way. I'll link down to it below. Great little read, but he talks all about how much the Marines appreciated the fire support from this crazy little thing. At one point in the article, he says, "When the going got weird in combat, the weird wanted an M50 Ontos firing support." There's also a particularly interesting story where he mentions that the NVA had begun to recognize the Ontos, and at one point an M50 had fired a tracer round through the window of a building to set up for the 105mm round to follow, but before they could even fire the recoilless, all the enemy troops just abandoned the building. Not the worst reputation to have, I suppose. So despite having just about everything going against this freaky little tank destroyer, it did find a home for some time and have a decent bit of success in Vietnam. The Ontos' undoing would be its light armor, as most of these were inevitably lost to mines or RPG fire before the last handful were passed off to the ARVN before the US started leaving the country. But all in all, what a weird little story about a weird little vehicle. I think it's great. Would I want a crew one? Not a chance. So with that said, in this next video, I'll show you how I painted and weathered this weird little guy up if you want to build a strange piece of military history for yourself. Thank you for watching, my friends, and until next time, be well, happy building. Cheers.